Yugi boy, you fell into my trap. She's looking all hot, bro. She's like, you wanna f me, bro? Oh, bro, what is this? I'm gonna pinch myself. Am I dreaming?
It's time
Rover wasn't the hero of 2.7. Galbrina was. Cantarella wasn't just goon bait. The Shuyin story, it was 10 out of 10. Relova 2.5 was my fucking goat. Boys and girls, I had a brilliant idea the other day. In anticipation of 3.0 releasing, we're going to enter an entire new concept, world building, and story dynamic. I wanted to do a rating from least to greatest just so people have a definitive idea on my stance on every single patch and what I thought of it. And this is going to not just take into account the story, but it's also going to take into account the patch overall. That said, why am I making this video? We have a vocal minority of dipshits who are bad faith actors, and they have recently spread a narrative that I don't like Wuthering Waves story. I don't like Wuthering Waves. I am just somebody who comes back when the game has good moments, and I'm doing the same thing for 3.0. And so I ended up thinking, I said, hold on, if that is true, I can go back and look at every single patch, what I rated it and what I said about it. And thankfully, boys, my channel, it has quite literally proof and receipts of everything I've said about every single patch because I reviewed them all. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about what I think and what I rated every single patch from least to greatest or greatest to least. Starting off with 2.0. 2.0 is a patch I think is uncontested. I think 2.0 isn't the best patch in all of 2.0 from 2.8 because it had the best story, but because of the impact, because of the bar that it raised, because of the standards that it ended up presenting to the gacha community. It was unprecedented what it did. And when you compare it to 1.0, in every single improvement that they made, it was monumental and nothing short of remarkable. They improved the voice acting, monumentally so. Not only did they improve the voice acting, it's the best voice acting in the space that I've ever heard, in my personal opinion. I'll be honest, they hired some of the best people.
This assignment was very last minute.
God damn, I can't focus, bro. But that didn't stop. The music in and of itself was 30 billion times better than the 1.0 music in all capacities. And it matched the theme of all the areas in all of 2.0. I still remember to this day when I would go into an area of the map and I would just sit there and just listen to the music that was associated with the vibe they were trying to give to you. Another track, man. The characters and the story, as well as the narrative, was improved dramatically so. I remember how interested I was when they very first revealed 2.0. Just seeing the Phasalia family versus Carlotta's family and the feud between them, and then seeing the church with Fenrico, and then seeing the landscape of Rinascita. All of this was so much more impressive than anything you had saw in 1.0. If that wasn't enough, the exploration when you get a 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0 has a massive buff, right? Because it's a whole new region to unveil. And so 2.0 had like kind of like strategic advantages in terms of it getting an edge over the remaining patches. Kind of like you expect 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0 to be the most like impactful due to these variables. But then they had the final thing that kind of like changed everything in an MTash moment. And that was the flight. The flight was introduced in 2.0. And that shit genuinely it changed everything. I would say that 2.0 was impactful not only to the entirety of Wuthering Waves, but impactful to the entirety of the gacha space. In terms of a graphic enhancement too, the visuals also got an enhancement. Chat, is there a single variable of 2.0 that didn't get improved upon? In-game. Yeah, you know what? I would say the caveat to what I'm saying is probably in-game, but I dare say that's just a problem across gacha games as a whole. All the in-games are dog shit and they all come off as very surface level. So I would say in-game's probably the one thing where 2.0 felt, but you were too busy just enjoying the cinema, honestly. See, now that I'm the male rover too, you know what I'm saying? I ain't no female rover this time. I actually think 2.0 was a cinema out of 10. In fact, I would like to bring up the thumbnail I made. This was the thumbnail that I made for 2.0. That was like in and of itself a statement of how good 2.0 was. So out of all of the patches, 2.0 would be a 10 out of 10 from where I stand. The last thing I want to talk about is the story. The story in 2.0 was honestly, from my point of view, it was probably a 6.5 to 7 out of 10. And that's not to say it was bad, but it was one of those where when you get into a new region and it's gacha storytelling, it kind of is a natural 6.5 to 7 out of 10 because they have to explain the new world building aspects, the story, as well as the characters, the narrative, and all of that takes a lot of setting up. And so it kind of puts itself in a position where it's natural to set up these things. You don't have a choice really. You got to introduce so many different things and concepts and plots. Kind of comes off as like a natural slow start. And so I think 2.0 in terms of story, it's far from being the best, but in terms of an overall patch and what it encompassed, yeah, I would say it was a 10 out of 10. Now I would like to move on to patch 2.1, which we'll keep this one short because patch 2.1 was in fact filler. The only thing I remember about patch 2.1 was sitting in the chat with Tectone, I think Genizad, possibly State Tone Test. I don't remember if all four of us, but that's the only thing I remember about 2.1, bro. It was just fishing. And I'm gonna be real, I said it then and I'll say it now. If you didn't have friends, that patch probably sucked ass. But if you had friends, you probably had a great time fishing and just dicking around and having a good time. It was quite pleasant, but honestly, 2.1 was so fucking forgettable. Outside of that, it was insane. And I still think the fishing for me was 2.1 most certainly is gonna belong somewhere at the very bottom. 2.2. Boy, oh boy, 2.2 was a patch that I think doesn't get enough credit. I think 2.2 was actually better than 2.0, but unfortunately 2.0, you can't top it when you consider the barriers it broke through, the impact it did, and the bar that it raised. You're not gonna have the same level of impact of 2.0 and 2.2 because 2.0 is groundbreaking. It was unprecedented. But if you take away all those buffs, I think 2.2 was better than 2.0. It just didn't have the impact. But 2.2, for me, I'm gonna say it was a 9.5 out of 10. And my only 0.5 was the fact that my gripe I will always have with Wuthering Waves not being able to really provide any real tangible stakes. They killed off the Imperator who already had one foot in the grave due to the battle with the Ternodian, and then they saved Cartathea at the end with the Imperator and the Rover. That was probably my only real problem with 2.2. But apart from that, the patch was one of the few patches in all of 2.0 that encompassed the entirety of the cast. And I truly can appreciate that. In fact, 2.2 highlights why I hate 2.8 and 2.6 a second half so much. In 2.2, you start off meeting Shakona in a garden. Thick as fuck, bad as fuck. And she presents to you her role in the story, how she has an affiliation with Carlotta, and how she has this ability to take you through the memories of your past. It was not even that much yapping in that. In fact, it was quite well paced. Then it sends you straight into the past to where you meet Cartathea. Already, we have met more personable characters than the entirety of 2.8. Right? Apart from that beginning, I'm talking about the first half of 2.8. So then we meet Cartathea and we introduce what's going on with Cartathea. And she's explaining to you how you got trapped. And this was unprecedented too. You weren't expecting to meet her in real time. This was supposed to be a memory of the past. And then you go to Cantarella's mansion, fat ass $1 billion mansion. And at this point, I realized this was a story that was so much better than the vast majority of the other stories that we saw in the latter half of 2.0. Already, we were meeting a whole cast of characters. Even the butler who was sent to send you to Cantarella was intriguing in and of itself. I was actually kind of mad that he wasn't a 4-star character, but Cantarella wasn't just goon bait. She was literally a 12 out of 10 character with big ass titties. Super fucking hot, right? The thing is though, Cantarella was one of the most, if not the most intriguing backstory in the entirety of the 2.0 patch. I would dare say it's up for debate. She not only explained to you and had a role to play in the entirety of the Raguna plot, but her family's backstory was truly one of detriment and sorrow. They had a role where they literally were getting fucked by the Ternodian generations upon generations, and their whole goal was to try and last as long as they could without the Ternodian taking control of their brain. But like, you learn so much about Cantarella and the Phasalia family's role in their history and how they tie into the overarching story in 2.2, and then you go on a merry little ride that becomes a bit more meaningful because it's not just let's go on a date with Cantarella. It was way better paced once again than 2.8 was. Like, you got to see not just the smidge of gooning with Cantarella, but the entirety of the backstory relatively paced well. How she ties into the Sentinel and how she was secretly the placeholder for the Sentinel when it was supposed to be Cartathea, you learn that as well. Then from there, you go into the inverted Sonaro sphere. You try to save Cartathea, but like as I'm sitting here like pointing all of this out, we're looking at a whole encompassed cast in 2.2. It's not we're only gonna hang out with Cantarella. It encompassed a lot of the Raguna culture and the richness of the history of it and how things function. The world building of it was way better linear paced than a lot of the other patches. Then to top all of that off, the exploration and the visuals, still to this day, I think it's the #1 most beautiful presentation of visuals. Going up into that sky with the fucking cinema goddamn whales flying, the stars, going on the date looking like Princess Zelda with Cartathea. Then the boat scene where you're fucking going across the water, bro, and you see the sparkling in the water and you see the cinema there. It's like they had a good balance between dating and appeasing their targeted audience and still sticking to the script like lint on denim. And this is what I appreciated greatly about 2.2. It wasn't just some one-dimensional ass way of, hey, Rover's dating the next fucking girl. It was much more story driven. It was much more lore driven, and it was much more encapsulating of what a story should look like as a whole. Now, I'm not gonna say it's perfect, right? They still did kind of like leave out Carlotta and their family because you had already done that in 2.0. They did leave out Zani. They left out a lot of characters, and I still feel like they could have went over to them to see what they were doing in the background. But then again, it's a gacha game on a patch-to-patch basis. That's probably why they didn't do it. There were flaws, but in my opinion, 2.2 is debatably the best story out of all of 2.0. It's debatably #1. I'm gonna be real with you. In my personal opinion, I want to add this in. I almost forgot about this. The Imperator was the last piece of another character involved in 2.2 where you got to learn about them. Now they did shove it exposition heavy at the very end of 2.2, and that was rushed. That was absolutely rushed. But still, Chacona, Cantarella, Cartathea, Imperator, cinema finish, way more of a wholesome story. But at the very end, you learned a lot about the Imperator's role in everything and how it tied in. But it was an exposition dump, and it did seem to be a bit rushed and handed off at the end. I still stand by that patch was fucking phenomenal. So overall, my rating for 2.2 was a 9 out of 10. I'm actually raising it to a 9.5. Once again, completely kills the narrative that Smack doesn't like Wuwa stories. Smack hates on Wuwa. He's over here for the hype. Bitch, I am the hype! Been giving this game glaze. Your selective hearing and your low EQ and IQ prevents you from seeing all the goodwill I put into the game. And you're gonna see that the further we go on down this review line. Y'all know I had to throw in that shot, chat. Patch 2.3 was another filler patch, but I would like to argue, because I am gonna be rating this, the Zani quests I enjoyed more than 2.8 too. I think the Zani quest had one of the most dog shit starts. It was like a 30-minute fucking drag fest. And then the second half of the Zani fest was a cinema out of 10, bro. You learned all about Zani. You did some like Batman fucking like chase event with her throughout the story. And then it just started picking up with insane amounts of cinema. I would say the Zani quest was still about a 6 out of 10, but it was still better paced and enjoyed. And this was a companion quest. It wasn't actually MSQ. It was still better paced, in my personal opinion, than the 2.8 Chiefs of Story quest. I'll be completely honest with you guys. Chat just reminded me about 2.3 second half, which I actually completely forgot about. You know what? That's a disservice, because Shakona's story was actually one of the best stories in the entirety of the game too as well. Because Shakona's story taught you all about her, but it also taught you about Cristoforo and how his powers work. Then it gave you an all-encompassing like backstory and lore of how the church as well as the people of Raguna were getting cooked by the fucking church and the false sentinel's influence on the church as a whole. Yeah, you know what? Damn, I'm thinking about this off the top of my head too. I very much enjoyed Shakona's story. That shit was really enjoyable because it wasn't just about Shakona. It was also about the people of Raguna and the circumstances that they were in due to the church operating under a false sentinel and fucking Fenrico being cooked. I think that story, to be honest, was no less than a 9 out of 10. I actually completely forgot about that. 2.3 second half redeemed the hell out of 2.3 in terms of the story narrative. I won't spend too much more time talking about it, but I did love 2.3 second half story a lot more than the rest of 2.0. 2.4. I would like to say that 2.4 was a very enjoyable story, but I think it was more cinematic than it was from a narrative point of like enjoyment. And the reason I say that is because once again, the stakes. They'll introduce ultimatums and then give you a narrative that is purely designed by the writer to like overdraft or like take over what a real stake could occur. And that's always going to be my biggest gripe with Wuthering Waves. It's like, oh, look, this is the stake, but we're going to like write in some shit that's like a little loophole outside of the ultimatum and stake we gave you. And that happened in 2.4 as well. But at least in 2.4, Rover didn't save Lupa, Lupa saved herself. This was one of the first times, deadass history of WuWa from 1.0 all the way up into 2.4, where Lupa, at least, she took account of her own destiny and her own story and saved herself. But I would like to say Rover definitely still played a heavy hand in it. Now, the other thing that I really liked about 2.4 story was character development. I think the character development between Rover, Cartathea, and Lupa was beautifully done. First of all, I like how they start off with the puzzlement of like, why the fuck are they showing Lupa overlapping with Mia? What's going on with Mia in and of herself? How does the whole entire Septimonian culture play here at hand? I'm gonna be real. 2.4 was cooking in a lot of aspects, because in 2.4, I'm gonna be real. I think 2.4's culture, Septimont, and maybe I'm biased here, I'll state that in a bit, was better done than 2.2 and Raguna. But my bias is that I love pantheons. I love warrior-driven races who fight for blood, honor, and glory. So I might actually be biased here because I enjoyed that lore a lot more than I enjoyed Raguna's lore. Once again, just stating the bias there. But it was so much like more intriguing because Lupa, although you were like understand, like there were some gooning moments, I ain't gonna cap with Lupa. She was so fucking hot, it was insane. I first want to talk about the bird who represents all the blood spilled throughout Septimont. That was another fascinating thing. That shit was super cool. And you learn all of this in 2.4. And every time I talk about these story narratives, it reinforces to me how dog shit 2.8 was. The 2.8 lovers ain't gonna like this review in this regard, but you know what? It's the truth. It's not just Lupa and Rover. It's Lupa, Rover, the houses, the damn bird, Arsinosa, even Augusta and Yuno. You get to understand that hierarchy and how that functions. It encompassed everything, bro. It wasn't just me and Lupa are going on a date, man. And then you see the character development between Lupa and Cartathea, and then Cartathea and Rover. And then at the end, it's Cartathea, Lupa, and Rover having a very like wholesome friendship moment. And oh yeah, Cristoforo, that's right. My goat Cristoforo and how he plays the real antagonist. By the way, I have to constantly compare it to 2.8. The antagonist is there. Your presence is felt. In 2.8, it was a fucking afterthought when you take the trailer and you're like, wait, I thought we were going into this Alice in Borderland thing. Oh, it's like poorly paced, just shoved in there. And then you got 2.4 where you feel the presence of Cristoforo and how the plot is thickening in terms of him trying to delete Lupa out of her character and place Mia in there to revive the Ternodian is so much more well packaged as a whole. You know what I'm saying? That said, I do think 2.2 still outpaced it. I do. I think 2.2 was still more visually stunning. I think it was more visually impactful. I think Cartathea and the Imperator, and I think this is personal opinion, by the way. I think if you like 2.4 more than 2.2, you are well within your right to do so. I think it's pretty close in that regard. But I like 2.2 a bit better due to the pacing and structure of how they took you through Chacona into Cartathea Inverted Scenario Sphere into the Cantarella Manor, which I think was very well executed, into Cantarella eventually revealing that she was the real Blessed Maiden, but she gave that power up to save and buy time for Fleur de Lis and Fleur de Lis basically and Cartathea. I think that was more beautifully done, and the payoff hit a lot harder than Lupa just saving herself, even though Rover had a lot to fucking do with it, if that makes sense. Cantarella had a strong presence in that story versus this, and I think that's why I like 2.2 a bit more than 2.4. That said, we aren't going to forget that 2.4 had one of the most cinematic finishes of all time. They brought in fucking UFO table, ufotable. for that finish. Demon Slayer levels of cooking during the 2.4 finish. And I don't want to forget that. Yeah, the music was peak too. And so I think for me, if 2.2 was a 9.5, I would say 2.4 for me sits between an 8.5 and a 9 out of 10. And I do want to state this. These are ratings based off Gacha storytelling, right? Not off of real storytelling. Oh, yeah. So look. Yeah, this was clickbait as fuck. AAA story quality. A bit of clickbait, bit of glaze in there. 1 hour. Holy shit. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, never mind. I was talking about the first half. The first half of 2.4 was in fact AAA story quality. It wasn't until I saw how it all unfolded. I left out something very important. Frolova was in 2.4, raising up that stake in intensity by her telling you what 2.4 had at hand. She was telling you about Cristoforo. She was the one that gave the ultimatum. She was another interesting thing, but I'm gonna be honest, the first half was a 9 out of 10. The second half and how it all unfolded was when I was like, ooh, nah. And I brought it down. I think I brought it down to an 8 out of 10. 2.4 for me due to how it all unfolded. I'm still gonna say 8.5. You're gonna get tired of me saying this, chat. When you look at 2.4 and 2.2 and 2.0 and how much of a wholesome, better driven narrative, and you compare it to 2.6 Yuno and 2.8, brother, how we're on the same field here, man. God damn. They had so many different characters and cast and plots and concepts and intrigues apart from just one-on-one dating sim, bro. Holy. And I'm gonna be real, that after story with Lupa, that's what you call setting up a date, a one-on-one, after you've done character development. It landed so much harder, bro. That's my thoughts on 2.4, boys. Now, 2.5. The great debate, the most polarizing patch in the history of Wuwa. The patch that I very much enjoyed due to the real friction, flawed character of Rover, and somebody finally challenging this pussy on his ideals, high horse, and virtue signaling that he loves to do. I love this patch because it was so polarizing. I enjoyed this patch because it was the first time we really got to see Rover have a personality. People might try to say this was a patch where you didn't see much of anybody else, and I would agree. But I think this patch, in contrast, shits on 2.8 once again, diabolically so, due to the pacing, the structure, and how it was all presented. Frolova is a character we have known since 1.0. So she's always carried a bit of intrigue about her. She's always been viewed as a villain, and everybody was of the perspective that this bitch was just evil. When you take all of that context going into 2.5, and then you keep meeting her, you met her in 2.4, she gave you like a tip off that comes off as like, is she helping me or is she trying to set me up? There was so much more interest packed behind her. There was literal character development with Frolova throughout the entirety of Wuthering Waves story leading into 2.5. And so once you get to 2.5, the landing of wanting to know what her deal is lands infinitely harder. It's a character that wasn't just shoved to you in one patch, but built up over time. This is why, for me, it wasn't just like, ah, fuck, who cares about this? I genuinely wanted to know, finally, what the fuck is this woman's story? And when you go into 2.5 and Rover gets drug in to be an asset to her, there's a lot of things going through your brain. Did she save him? Does she care about him? Is she bad? Is she good? All of this stuff gets answered as you continually go through this quest. Now, one of the things I remember as a solid point taken away from this quest was the fact that it did take it spent too much time hyper fixating on Rover and Frolova. And this is something I have criticized through and through throughout the entirety of Wuwa. Stop fucking spending the entirety of the patch and the story fixating on Rover and who he just met. Go show off what the hell somebody else is doing. Go show off what the hell the rest of the world is doing. Because if you don't do this, it makes the game seem like it's empty outside of Rover. And so this, I completely acknowledge, it was a weak point of 2.5. It's a weak point for 2.6 UnoQuest. It was a weak point for 2.8. But where they deviate is the character development, the friction between Rover and Frolova. He doesn't trust her at all. But as you continuously go through this shit, it starts dripping things of Frolova's fucking background. And you start to see slowly but surely who she is, how she got to where she got to. And that shit was so much infinitely better paced because it was also introducing infinite questions of why this is happening. Then her and Rover keep having these tit for tats that are introducing to the player morals and ethics. The player, as you're going through this, you're going, for Rover's right. Yeah, Rover's right here. Yeah, he's right. Furlova's right here. Yeah, no, I understand Furlova. It is introducing to the player critical thought and the ability to think about morals and ethics. And this to me is good storytelling when it invites people to go, hold up, fuck, wait, what is Rover right for snapping at her right there? He is when you think about all the shit she's done in the past. But damn, now that we know this about Furlova, I think she's kind of fucking got some merit to be feeling that way. This patch did that better than any patch in the entirety of the game. Bar fucking none. Bar none. If you disagree, I don't care about your disagree. And that is why it deviates entire. It wasn't just Rover's dating Furlova. Furlova falls for Rover. No, it was tragic. That is good writing. To challenge the very narrative of what your perception perceives is good and bad. Furlova 2.5 was my fucking goat of this entirety. Now, I don't think it was the best quest because I don't think everybody is fit to consume this type of story. But from an adult perspective, this is my goat of 2.0 as a whole. I loved it. Rover got challenged on all of his ideals and all the decisions he makes that he thinks is perfect and that the retarded self-insert thinks is perfect. They're not. They're very much questionable. And it's a matter of perception of what you're trying to do based on your people and your ideals. And Furlova was doing the fucking same thing. It's all a matter of perception. There is no perfection. There's a choice. And that choice is clearly to the agenda of the fucking person and their circumstances. Now, what I would like to say is that when you go into the backstory of Furlova, it shows the beautiful tragedy. It shows a girl who was perfectly innocent get robbed of her innocence. It shows the cold-hearted world that she lived in after that innocence was taken away from her. You cannot tell me, or anybody for the matter, that 2.5 wasn't the best damn way to show off a villain becoming a villain. You can't. It was so good. It was. I loved it, man. And the fact that people try to sit here and deny that this patch wasn't cooking in these aspects is fucking absurdity. When Rover and Furlova are at odds, after he learns everything about her and he's trying to figure out what's true and what's not, but he's also at the same time trying to judge her for doing everything she did to save her people by at any means at all costs. And Rover does the same thing for who he chooses is good and who's not. He's like, oh, this person, I approve of them, so I'm gonna save them against all odds. I will save them. I'm the hero. I don't care. I'm gonna do it regardless of what detriment and what that could lead to in terms of potential danger. And he gets saved over and over again because the fucking writer just plot armors his dumbass decisions into the game. They do. They plot armor it. And then the community who can't like have a legit adult discussion goes, you're just wrong. This is why it did it. Look, if you go back and look at that, that's why it happened. It's perfect. It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. That's the writer's job to make it make sense. But is it plot armor? Yes, it's fucking plot armor, my boy. Rover has made a lot of selfish decisions in his newfound, I don't know anything about my past body. He's quite literally an infant in his decision making in so many different ways. He's impulsive in his emotions when he's taking his virtues and putting them in front of a decision that should be made for the betterment of humanity. Truly. This is why I love 2.5, because Furlova was pointing all of that shit out in the great debate. And at the end of the day, when it was all said and done, this choice he made to prevent her from doing what she was doing, although it was the correct choice, it was the hypocritical choice when we reflect back on everything he did up to this point, as well as deleting his own memories. Now you can make the decision or the argument that she met him one time in a theater and that was just fucking ridiculous. And you know what? I can agree to some capacity. I take into account her own trauma though, of her whole family getting blown up and exploded and nobody ever knowing what happened. It's just her alone. And she finally finds somebody that understands her through her play she played. I think there was a lot more intimacy in that moment, given the context that people don't give credit to, but I'm not going to force you to say that that's how it should have turned out. This is a quick edit in for 2.5, further going into how beautiful 2.5 was. The final thing to give the consumer a bit of a empathy towards Furlova was how the Grand Architect deeply preyed on her vulnerability at the time when she was insanely fucking vulnerable after all her family got blown up, her entire village got blown up, and at the weakest part of her entirety of her life, in comes the Grand Architect to prey on that vulnerability. This is actually something that happens in real life with women. There are scumbag men out there who will take advantage of a vulnerable woman in a mind that's obviously not stable, and they will use and abuse the shit out of them. And I think this is what happened with Frolova. And in the sad tragedy of this is how, unlike the rest of the women in this story, she didn't have a savior at this time. Rover was nowhere to be found. I'm not blaming the guy. I'm just telling you, he's always there to save the day for everyone else. He was not there to be like, fuck that, bro. Y'all ain't having this girl. She's coming under my wing. And that's the beautiful tragedy of Frolova's story. And so, like, I think that was the other part of 2.5 that doesn't get enough credit, how the Grand Architect manipulated the living fuck out of Frolova as well as Rover. I disguised himself as Rover too, by the way, right? Like, there's just so many ways that 2.5 was cooking. And I forgot to add that in, and that was worth adding into. The Grand Architect was a masterful way of putting in that antagonist in a discreet way that was slowly but surely puppeteering Frolova. And at that point, she doesn't care. She's getting abused and she knows it at that point, but she doesn't care. She's now at the mindset, I'll do anything to try to bring my people back. Now, the final thing I would like to talk about, and I forgot to bring this up, is that Frolova should have stayed dead. It would have been beautiful. It would have been a beautiful tragedy. The fact that she came back was cringe. And I mean, came back immediately. It's like, fuck, bro. The best way to bring back anybody is to bring them back when everybody is convinced they are actually dead. They brought them back in the same patch. Immediately gave it away. Oh, Frolova can't die, by the way. I've never seen anybody that can kill her. That's literally what Grand Architect said. He said, I'm not even sure she can be killed. All of that build up just to say, oh, she's still here. She's still alive. That was I'm not gonna lie. That was a massive fucking L, guys. Massive nuclear goddamn L, actually. I forgot about that. That's gonna bring my shit down to 8.5. That pissed me off. That shit pissed me off, bro. That's my entire thoughts of 2.5. I forgot about that. Now I want to talk about 2.6. I'll be real, I think I gave 2.6 a lower rating than the rest of the patches we brought up. The first part of 2.6 wasn't bad. I loved meeting Augusta in her chamber looking like a boss ass bitch. And then it goes into a cinematic scene where she's like, she does like a Shumpo step to Rover. And it's not even like an anime adaptation scene. It's like in graphics rendered. Bro, I thought that shit was so cool. It was max ore farming. It was some weeby edgy shit, right? But I genuinely enjoyed it because then she ended up having a conversation with Rover about what is getting ready to occur and why she requested him in the first place. And she basically wanted him to come over to these thing called the Hunting Grounds, which is a rich Septimonian like event that occurs yearly. And it's not something they celebrate by choice. And I think this is what's so beautiful about the Pantheon type of vibe that comes in with Septimont culture. It's something they made a celebration in honor of the warriors that defend Septimont from like getting obliterated. This is something they are forced to do every year to prevent the lament from cooking the entirety of Septimont. And she explains to him in an exciting manner that this is what they're going to do. This shit blew my mind. I was like, holy fuck. Their people's lives are literally on the line, and they're going over here in excitement, in thrill of the hunt. They look forward to that shit. I was like, damn, that's some gangster ass shit, bro. I'm gonna be real. There was some exposition dumping in 2.6. I loved the cinema aspect of it. That's one thing Wuwa does well. But man, there was a lot of exposition dumping when you were going through this shit. A lot of lore. And I think a lot of people appreciated the lore, and a lot of people were like, holy fuck, this is kind of heavy. But one thing that was truly cool is we all know Septimonians do not worship the Sentinel, the Imperator. But they do appreciate and acknowledge the Sentinel. And what was cool about this is how it unveiled that the Sentinel was a pivotal point of how they were able to do this year by year. They set up this bulwark. The Sentinel left behind this device that was like a bulwark that was like a bottle cap on the lament spreading throughout the lands. And this was how they were able to take the, I guess, excess lament that would get out of this bottle cap, if you will, and they were able to contain that shit. The Septimonians who would go out to this hunting grounds and prevent them from going. But it was only possible because the vast majority of the lament trying to get on the land was contained by the Sentinel device that was left behind from the Imperator. And so like, this was really cool in that aspect, because you got to learn more as the lore and world building of Septimonian culture and how it played out. But there was a lot of pacing issues. This patch, I would say, was comparable to 2.0. It was like you had to understand all this shit and how it functioned in order for you to appreciate 2.7. And you know what's funny? Some people might even say it was lore that wasn't necessarily needed for 2.7. I would say you can go into 2.7 and still enjoy it for what it was without understanding this, but you would have a much more deeper appreciation for how Septimonian culture tied in to the finale. I think with that given, it had its necessary role to play, but it was more so, for me at least, a build-up, which is inherently slow going into that 2.7 finale. The other thing is there was a lot of, like simping with Rover. It was a lot of like the typical self-insert thing. Oh, you're the one guy that's the question mark. Oh, I am so interested in you, but I'm a bitch to everyone else. Oh my God. That was a lot of that. And that shit for me, it's cringe. Rover isn't really doing anything to earn this level of glaze and this level of dick riding, other than he's the omnipotent being. There were moments where you just hear just confess her heart to you about her role in the place, but that's not earned. It's just being told to you. When I see all of this, I'm just like, where is the payoff for it? I don't see it. And so I take problem with that. It was kind of shoved into 2.4 as a self-insert experience. And you know what? I'll just say that wasn't for me. For you or other people, you might have thought it was perfect. You might have thought it landed perfectly well. I'm always going to be disconnected from that. Maybe it's because I'm a bit older than you guys, but I'm just like, yeah, this shit is cringe. She's hot. Fucking cringe. And then finally, she does the tear-dropping thing. Right? The tear-dropping thing that gives away a foreshadowing that she sees some daunting thing that's going to occur. This for me was a massive disappointment when 2.6 was all said and done, because it gave off another stake. Oh shit, somebody's gonna die. I remember believing this. I was like, oh, she sees something in some crazy event that's gonna occur. Somebody's dead. And then you go over to the ending and nobody dies. No, but not a single person, not even Augusta dies. Augusta fights you at the end and overcomes the false sovereign, and that's it. It's like, okay. And then at the end, they drip in, not through the MSQ, but like by you wandering around, that nobody remembers And I'll be real, at this point, I'm a little interested. I'm like, oh, whoa, fuck, hold up. Nobody remembers Well, damn. There we go. We might have a stake here. And then it gets obliterated in the second half of 2.6. Rover goes through a realm of infinite possibilities, and anything could happen, pro and con, but he's tethered to so he knows exactly where to find her in this infinite void realm of millions of possibilities because he has a tethered connection to her. Holy fucking plot armor. Jesus Christ, how much plot armor are you gonna give this shit just to save her, bro? Holding hands, sitting in the fucking in the goddamn garden, bro. She's looking all hot, bro. She's like, you wanna fuck me, Rover? I couldn't take none of this shit serious, bro. I just couldn't, guys. I'll be honest with you, bro. It was one of those where I was just like, brother, there's no way I'm sitting here consuming this, bro. And you know what's funny? This was the only part of entirety of 2.0 I didn't review. I reviewed 2.6 first half. I didn't review 2.6 second half. I was like, bro, fuck this. I'm out, dog. I'm not even going to talk about this, dude. So in my opinion, 2.6 as a whole was maybe a 6.5 out of 10, maybe even a 6 out of 10. But I gave the first half of it a 7 out of 10. When you consider that second half, I'll bring it to like a 6.5. I'm gonna be real. Boys, we forgot about Murmur's Town. Oh my fucking God. Holy. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This was one of the worst pacing issues in all of 2.0, bro. Murmur's Town wanted to convince you of Augusta and this obscure friend that Augusta made. And it was such a good dialogue. Unfortunately, it was on par with HSR storytelling. And you're just sitting here looking at two people yap fucking your ears off. You have to go out of the Murmur's Town to do something that allows you to progress through the Murmur Town lore. And it's a very important thing to do. But how they made you do it was just kill some random ass mobs, click a button, go back in the Murmur's Town, and repeat this over and over and over and over again. That was so unbelievably horrible in terms of presentation. I was like, oh my God, dude, this is so ass. Then, if that wasn't enough, the presentation of like the bond formed between Augusta as a little girl and this obscure girl that she made as a friend, It was a lot of staring at walls and Hoyo storytelling, or staring at each other. And then they would have these meaningful dialogue moments that were sad. Music was hitting, but what you were looking at was that Hoyo shit. It was like, I had an unfortunate thing that happened. My family got killed. I'm like, holy, it was bad. And you know what's funny? This is going to tie into my gripe with 2.7, right? But 2.6 in its entirety was a shit show. This is an edit in because I forgot again about this pivotal point. But yeah, it reinforces the 6.5 rating. It's finally time to talk about 2.7, boys. When you're the finale, you are inherently going to have a hype, appreciation, and anticipation that is bigger than the rest of the patches. And this is kind of why 2.7, similar to 2.0, cheats. It's debatably the best of all time because it was a fucking finale. They poured all their resources into it. So of course, the pacing was going to be a bit more better. The cast was going to be a lot more involved. It's the Avengers finish. It kind of like, it inherently has this juice that other patches are not going to have. The cinematic finish was fucking unreal. Man, I remember losing my goddamn mind at just how well they delivered that finish. Oh! The Otis is fire, Bro, I'm getting tears of joy, bro. All my life. This shit is the definition of peak. My favorite thing about 2.7 was the same gripe I had with 2.5. Too much fucking time fixating on Galbrina and my goat, I forget his name, her entity that saved her life to save his own life. But you spent a lot of time doing that part. But the voice acting was so fucking godly. Bro sounded like sounded like my goat, Jeremy Irons, the VA for Scar from Lion King. But then learning about Galbrina, even though it spent a lot of time, it was wonderful how you got to learn about Galbrina and who she came to be while she was stuck in this void realm with all these evil entities and stuff. And then her entity, much like in contrast to what they normally do in gacha games, was convince you everybody's secretly good. No, this nigga's a savage, and they stayed true to that. They stayed true to him being born in darkness and lament. You can't possibly convince anyone that an entity like that is good. He stayed true to his identity as a savage ass fucking chimera, bro. Like he's not here to convince you he's good. He's here to convince you that he is a chimera, brother. And given the opportunity, he will obliterate everybody.
Use their fear to drive them out. But alas, this time, the true Galbrina had come.
That was one of my favorite parts. But the other part that was my favorite was actually executed so piss poor. And I said this in my 2.7 review. The rest of the cast being involved in the story, just seeing people, it was such a charm to it. It was such a nostalgia to it. Finally, god damn, it took y'all long enough. And you didn't even really get to see them that much. Their roles weren't heavy, but it was just the matter of seeing them. It meant everything. I think they poorly executed it. I think they could have done a better job showing what Shorekeeper, Camellia, and the entirety of the Black Shores was doing in the background versus just, hey, we're here. You just saw them and then that was it, you know? I think it could have been a better job with, you know, Zani and them. I think the only people who really had spotlight was whoever the hell was with us during the Galbrina part. I think Galbrina had a bit too much spotlight. It was like, damn, I know y'all are shilling her during her banner, bro, but can we give some spotlight to some other fucking characters, you know? Seeing Calcharo, I think everybody damn near passed out seeing Calcharo finally be in the story, but did he really do anything? No, he didn't really do anything. That's what I mean by the 2.7 had that cheat code buff of the finale payoff. That was just so cinema that you couldn't deny it. You know what I'm saying? But I would have loved to see a more encompassing story with all of its pieces to the story of Rinascita as a whole. They didn't do a good job, but it didn't matter. It deadass didn't matter. They starved us of these characters being involved in the story for so long that we lost our fucking minds. And that shows you the real power of involving everyone else. Shu Yin still shows up, max aura farming, and there's a part of the story where you don't even see Rover. It's just Shu Yin and why he's there. That shit was immaculate, brother. And then he goes in battle Scar, and it's only him and Scar battling off. I'm like, we need more of this. Fuck Rover for at least 3 episodes, bro. He ain't gotta be in every episode, my guy. It's okay. It's okay to focus on other people's lives and their love interests. It's okay, brother. I assure you. When I grew up, I fucking loved being inspired by the Giga Chad who had the girl under their arm, who was the side character. I was like, fuck, I want to be that guy. These niggas are so ass backwards in this space. They think that's cuckoldry. They think you're a cuck for appreciating a well-rounded story, for going, hey, does that side character have any love interests? They're fucking fried in the brain. Nigga, the real cuck is you only wanting a self-insert experience because you don't get no puss. Now you can thumb down this video because I'm telling you the truth, but you're the cuck, buddy. Let me get back on topic. Sorry. I know I'm an asshole, but I'm a necessary asshole. If you give me a story that doesn't just focus on one man getting all the attention from all the women, your story is so much better. And there's exceptions and things. There is, sure, right? But see, when I watched Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, which is one of my favorite rom-com slice of life drama animes ever, it was a beautiful anime, because the main protag fell in love with one girl, and the tragedy and the stakes that were at hand were beautifully presented. But like, that anime shows you how to properly build a love connection, to establish one guy saving a stranger and building love through him wanting to save that stranger. It's properly done. It's properly executed. If you've never seen Rascal Does Not Dream of a Bunny Girl Senpai, first ignore the title. It's a dumbass anime title. Give it a chance. I guarantee you're gonna be like, smack, that fucking anime was some peak. Getting back into this story, it's a story where over and over again, the gacha debuff makes you take the love interest or intimate moments less and less serious, because the gacha stories, their number one goal is to prolong this shit as long as possible. It's the same shit over and over again. Oh, Rover's meeting another girl, so nobody else is. It's just Rover. I can't take that serious the longer it goes on. And so I'd like to go back to 2.7. All of that to say, involve the other cast more often. That's all I'm saying. Now, at the end of 2.7, and this is a long one, I found it unbelievably cringe that the Fraxidus that has done all of these abhorrent and intolerable, borderline evil things, also that they can create a society of strong individuals, essentially, like get rid of weak people on some goddamn Saiyan shit. Who knows? I found it crazy once again that nobody got fucking killed. No, and at the we had the same goal all along. You forget that we were once your whatever the hell they called it, pillars, which means they worked for Rover at one point. This was my plan all along. You boy, you fell into my trap. We were your waystones. You did exactly what I wanted you to do. What the fuck? God damn. Is this gonna happen every time? This game has been out for an entire year and some change, and this shit keeps happening. Cristoforo's always on some, I'm 2 steps ahead of you. I was waiting on Cartathea to cook my fucking diabolical plan just so I can have the plan behind the plan. I can't take this shit serious, bro. Where the fuck is the real villains? When's this shit gonna happen? Where Rover and the good cast is so busy fighting the bad guy that they turn around and they see Cartathea got stabbed in the back by a Fraxidus member. And they were like, nigga, you was too busy focusing on that shit versus focusing on what the fuck we was trying to do. It's like, you're never gonna see this, ever. And so I can't take that serious because all these stakes and all these dangers get introduced, and at the end of the day, everybody gets out unscathed. We call that plot armor. We call that narrative convenience for the writer. And it's all for the sake of, I don't know, apparently the demographic not being able to handle real tragedy and real death. That's my problem with the ending. And you got people on the internet, these niggas are retarded. They're like, Smack said they're the good guys. Nigga, they pretty much aren't the bad guys at this point. If they worked for the main protag, it's a matter of perception at this point. You're fighting your good fight and they're fighting their good fight. So who's the villain here? If you change the perspective, they're the good guys. And so that is my biggest discontent with how everything played out. But, you know, apart from that, I would say that the big reveal of Threnodian calling out Abraxas, that was a beautiful plot. Hidden cleverly too. I was like, wow, that was like good writing for me, because it was like we finally understood something. We got some drip of some lore about the Abraxas with the Thermodian thing. I loved that. I actually I dead ass loved it. This was what 2.7 did correctly. You finally got to see all of these little build up moments that Wuwa has been dripping to you across the span of the story coming back into fruition. We finally saw who the Grand Architect was and what he been doing with his old ass. I would say 2.7 is a 9.5 mainly because it was a finale. 2.7 second half was probably comparable to 2.2 in value. And it wasn't long. It was only 1 hour. Hear me out. This was the first time, unprecedented in the history of Wuwa, where we actually barely saw Rover. We focused on an entirely different character by the name of Shuyan, and we got to learn everything about this man's backstory, but it didn't just fixate on him. You met Shuyan on a side story type of ordeal. The background shit that is ongoing while the Rover is doing his heroic shit. First time like ever. I'm like, holy shit, they're doing it. We finally get to see what's happening in the background. Shuyan talked to so many people with his own personality. You got to see their interactions and character bonding. He talked to the church dude. He talked to Cantarella. He talked to Carlotta. He talked to Geshu Lin. You saw the past between him and Geshu Lin and why he harbors this guilt and this sense of responsibility to go and like take people out. Brother, that pacing was so immaculate. There wasn't a dull moment in 2.8 for me. Shuyan's he talked to Shakona. It's like, bro, he talked to so many people. Like, it was like, whoa, bro, what is this? I pinch myself. Am I dreaming? I hate that I did it off stream. I do. Because that story, the Shuyan story, it was 10 out of 10, bro. The fucking cutscenes of him and Geshu Lin going at it, bro. Bang, 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 bang. Bringing Geshu back in. Finally, we see what the fuck going on with Geshu. He's still alive. Holy shit. I think that shit was better than 99% of the stories in Wuwa. Oh, I almost forgot one. What was the fucking purpose of Murmur's Town building up all that character development between our Augusta and Galbrina, and they never shared a single real intimate moment? Didn't even have an expression like, oh my God, that's my childhood friend. Fuck. Bro, come on. I don't give a fuck how badass Galbrina is, how badass Augusta is. The love and intimacy they shared as children, seeing each other for the first time in that long, and it was just like literally ignored. It was just ignored, bro. I was like, huh? What the fuck? Where's the bond, man? Shit. But Galbrina was executed like so well. That bitch was a badass. Galbrina out-aura-formed the shit out Rover. Rover wasn't the hero of 2.7. Galbrina was. I'm gonna be real, bro. That bitch was the main character, bro. She was too much of a main character. And I loved it. I did. I loved it. It was about time Rover took a back seat and got little broed. She little broed the shit out of him. The final patch of 2.0, which is 2.8. And I think I've dripped all of my discontent with 2.8 throughout the entirety of this story review. I've also made a video in recent memory, so I feel like I don't have to spend too much time talking about it. I already made an entire video on this. And you know what was funny? Against all odds, majority of people said you can't deny that logic. 2.8 was a story that was so ass in so many different ways. But the primary way was moments and intimacies that did not land in any capacity due to a half-mute protagonist with no engagement in conversation other than objectivities occurring. And then for no reason at all, this girl with the tragic past pours her tragic past, trauma dumps onto you, and then gives you these fucking twinkle-eyed moments. Rover says the perfect lines, and there's no at all in any level character interaction and bonding really formed in 2.8. Zero. She dumps exposition on her circumstances onto you when you can explore that and learn it passively through the city. Instead, they make you go into a fucking coffee shop and she yaps your ears off with very important exposition. The exposition dump is so excessive about all of this stuff. It is the most tell and don't show shit I've ever seen. And all Rover does, I see. Let me ask you a question to the question you asked. I see. Let's go in the park, go on a date, show off some beautiful background, and I'm going to continue to have the most boring fucking personality ever. She's explaining so much to him. This coffee house. The only line, guys.
Your clipping forte?
Chisa never once takes you on this adventure and you see a real bond formed through these two. It just happens. All of the intimate moments aren't earned. They aren't earned, man. I'll say that as many times as I need to say it. And then the pacing, nothing else is happening. We take the backstory of all of Wuthering Waves and it's the same shit. Rover meets the new girl, which takes away from any intimacy for real, because it's just the next gathering wives. Before this, they give off this interesting plot where I'm thinking we're going into this story where we're gonna do this Death Games ordeal like Alice in Borderland, because that's literally what it was. And then they show off this like subliminal way of her battling her own insecurity and confidence. And that leads me to believe we're going into an arc where it's gonna really focus on that. Maybe we're gonna be learning about Chisa as we're playing these death games, and we're gonna form bond between two characters, and she's gonna eventually go, you know what? I've gotten close with this guy now, and I wanna just pour my heart on what's happening and shit. Bro, none of that shit happened. And it was the most fucking rushed pacing I had ever seen in my life. It was so forgettable how things were happening. Then you got this other girl who is intimate with Chisa. She's like the best friend with Chisa. She's the one who pulled Rover inside of this fucking place and told him that she wanted him to help her. As I'm sitting here looking at all of this shit, I'm just like, bro, none of this is possible to land in a singular patch. You're stuffing so much shit and you're expecting me to have heartfelt moments in one patch? They skipped so many important character development moments and bonding moments and just got straight to the shit that would land harder. The moment where she twinkles in her eyes when I lost my fucking shit.
You're right. We're partners.
This shit corny as fuck!
I received a pressure.
I lost it because I was like, where is this? Like, what led to how? How does this even occur, bro? And I showed off Final Fantasy VII Remake in my video. I strongly suggest you go watch it. And I showed how it would have been properly better presented, where it's two people actually talking, not fucking exposition dump response, exposition dump response. No, they're literally talking with one another. And you're learning the body language, how they're filling each other out, how they're responding to certain jokes or serious tones. And you're starting to see the personalities of these two come out and form a bond through these interactions. That doesn't exist in Wuwa. And now, you know, you're gonna notice it a lot more. You're gonna notice that when Wuwa introduces Rover with a new girl, the new girl falls for him, and there's not a single fucking like build-up earned to where they fall for him, really. They just set it up in like almost like an artificial manner. Right now, going into 3.0, and I've changed my stance on how I'm gonna enjoy the story now. I'm just no longer gonna take it serious, which is gonna be more funny and more enjoyable. They're gonna set up a stance that's similar to Bunny Girl Senpai. Nobody can see this girl except Rover. Off rip, none of the bonding of Bunny Girl Senpai is going to occur. None of it. It's only gonna be, you should know that she loves him because he's the only one that can see her. I see it coming from a mile away, bro. I see it coming from a mile away. But this time, I'm done taking the story serious. You know what I mean? At this point, I understand it really is just glazing the next girl, and the next girl falls over, and it's a self-interest shit over and over again. Anyways, I wrap all that to say 2.8 was an absolute shit show in terms of pacing, in terms of character development. It's like this girl found her own confidence and they just put Rover there for the fucking self-insert player to be like, to lie to themselves and convince themselves they're the reason she found her confidence. It's like, it's a joke. 2.8 second half is a completely different ballgame. If they would have just went with that vibe the entire time, I would have had a whole entire experience. The second half, where everyone shows up, nostalgia, amazing. Where they see the little interactions between Camellia, Shorekeeper, and how they interact with each other, beautiful. Cinema, executed perfectly. The cutscene where you see them all interact with each other, wholesome as fuck. If they would have just done the slice of life part, period, all slice of life and from start to finish, Quest would have been a lot better. Quest would have been an easy 7 out of 10, 7.5, maybe even 9 out of 10 if we just grade it purely on just not to be taken serious. You know, I would have dead ass gave it a lot higher rating, but it was the fact that they tried to force you to care about a girl you just met with no actual buildup or earned established relationships that made me go, fuck this, I'm out, bro. This shit is a whole pack of ass. That said, that is my personal experience with 2.8. The last thing is fucking Nami-Pon talking at 1 mile per hour. That shit made everything infinitely worse. because Nami Pon talks unbelievably slow and the characters talk unbelievably slow. They don't talk natural. And the thing is, Chisa had a great voice actor that just pretty much kept the same tone the entirety throughout the story. And so I was just like, man, there's nothing else here, bro. Like, you take all of this and this gets in the way of pacing, at least for me. You know what I'm saying? So that's pretty much all of my thoughts on 2.8. Like I said, if you want a more structured criticism of it, go watch the video of me critiquing 2.8. But that's gonna wrap it up. That was my entirety of 2.0 to 2.8. Now I want to rank the patches to end off this video. All right, so this is what I rank every patch. First place, 2.0. Second place, 2.7. As I said, they had cheat codes. I think they had literal cheat codes. The on patch introducing flight and all that shit, I already explained it. 2.7 being a finale, cheat code. 2.2, I already explained why I loved it. 2.5 is my personal number one, but if I'm being fair here, I think 2.5 might sit in this top 4 category, depending on, you know, your personal take on it. 2.4, that's the Lupa patch. Number 5. 2.6, that's first half with Augusta and Yuno, and then second half, Yuno. Number 6. 2.7, 2.3, that's Shakona and Zani. Zani personal companion quest. I would actually say 2.3 is higher. Yeah, you know what? Because I forgot about Shakona's quest, yeah, I'll keep it there. It's fine. I think 2.3 might even go right here because Shakona's quest. 2.8 is number 8, and then 2.9 is 2.1. This is my least to greatest ratings of every single patch, and I would like to say this is based off of pretty much mainly story content, I would say. But 2.0 and 2.7 had a bit of a power up because of finale and openers. That is my least to greatest patch rankings, boys. Comment down below, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Peace, love, and happiness. I'll catch you guys on the flip side.
The camera, it's alive! It's alive! It's the real content, bro.